A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, speaking of seeing the light, we are going to look at the light today because as the whole world seems to be experiencing a cost of living crisis, it pays to remember what the Bible says about finances and his provision in our lives. Today we're joined by Alex Cook from Wealth with Purpose, and he will share with us his economic outlook, and sadly there is a chance of another rate rise later this year. We'll also discuss the federal government's culpability in the state of our economy. Our energy policies, immigration policies, and fiscal spending in general is having a negative effect. And this is affecting all of us in our daily lives. And I want to say, Alex Cook from Wealth with Purpose, welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be back with you this month.
It's always good, mate, having such a good-looking human being with us, and not to mention that voice, old golden tonsils himself. But what is your economic outlook right now, Alex? What are you seeing and feeling?
Yeah, well, look, I think the reality is the economy is extremely weak. On a positive note, anyone who pays tax got a tax cut yesterday, so that's the positive side, but that's pretty much largely where it ends. The big concern, really, this has been the concern since the whole COVID mania that took place, has been around inflation, and that's the thing that's really affecting everyone. You know, every time you walk into Coles or Woolies, you feel the pressure. You know, you feel the cost of living is continuing to rise. So the challenge there is inflation figures came out last week, and they were higher than expected. And the problem is they were heading back up. You know, most of us were hoping that the Reserve Bank's rate cuts would really have bitten enough and brought inflation down. I mean, their target range is 2 to 3%. But yesterday, I should say last week, it went back up to 4%. Now, what that means is really the Reserve Bank's job's not done, not complete. And to be fair to them, though, they're fighting a battle of which they have only one lever, and that's interest rates, whereas the government is the one that's, if you like, stoking the inflation fire. And that's what's really the main cause of it. But really, the end game of all of this and the end impact for you and I and anyone who has a mortgage is that rates are likely to rise. That's a really significant possibility, and some economists are now saying as early as August. Now, that's great if you're a retiree on a fixed income and your interest rates are going up. But for those many Aussies, whether in their 30s and 40s and even 50s, have a mortgage, they're the ones that are going to really feel the brunt of it. So that to me is the probably the really, I guess, concerning one. But really, the main thing that we've witnessed ever since, under the current government is really, and it may sound a little bit dramatic, but we are witnessing a collapse in Australian living standards. It's basically falling at the fastest rate in the last 50 years. And many of us are now starting to ask the question. I mean, real wages are back now at 2009 levels. So, we're in 2024, but real wages are back at 2009. So many people are feeling the fact that inflation is actually giving you a wage cut. So it's all well and good to get a tax cut, but the reality is inflation is eating away at your real wages. And unfortunately, Australia is performing really poorly in this space. And of course, there's all of the housing pressures, whether it's mortgages or rents. I mean, rents are up 50% since the pandemic. So it's very tough out there. But what's interesting that I've observed, I see this amongst the people I interact with, is there's a real generational gap. So Australians that own their own homes outright, they're fine. They're on a fixed income. They're earning money from their money in the bank. They don't have a rent or a mortgage. They're doing really well, that group. And in fact, they're spending more. Whereas the younger generation, those in their 20s, 30s, 40s, are all spending a lot less than what they were a couple of years ago. And that's the reality of they're seeing their real wages collapse. And so it's very tough out there in reality. And the unfortunate thing is government policy is not providing any relief. And that, a lot of the things you see, like in the budget that come out, to me, I really don't like. I define them as kind of trinkets. They're throwing a bit of money here for a bit of energy it's all very short term. None of it's the real major reforms that need to take place. So, it's a very tough economy for a certain portion of the population, a significant portion.
Yeah, and I just want to let our listeners know, if you've got a comment about this, how is the cost of living affecting you? Have you just found things really hard out there in your world? Are you running a small business, or are you a salary or wage earner and you're just really struggling? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and the talk lines are open now on 1-800-316-316. That's 1-800-316-316. Give us your thoughts, or maybe you've got a question for Alex. But Alex, I got a question for you. I think you were fairly kind to the government then. Let's be honest here. What has this current Australian federal government, because even Trump in the debate on Friday against Biden, he basically said when you came into office, the economy was pretty good, and it was pretty good except for COVID. But, Biden's obviously invested in a lot of these energy policies and what Trump was defining as, I think, the Great Green Scam or something he called it. But, to what extent has our government also gone down this pathway of trying to, fight this climate war, this alleged climate war, and invested money and increased our cost of living just through climate policies? Let's just focus on climate policy right now.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, look, I'm a proud climate denier, if you want to call me that, as I'm sure many are. I've probably offended half your listeners, but certainly I think the whole thing is nonsense and doesn't stand up to common sense and reason, and certainly not scientific reason in my view. But nonetheless, the issue is, let's assume whether it's true, right? Assuming it's true, you don't just go shutting off all your coal plants and then bringing in all these renewable energy as the alternative, unless you've already got the infrastructure in place. And we don't have the infrastructure in place, whether it's for electric cars or whether it's for just generally powering the country. And I've seen people warning that Australia may, over summer, have blackouts. I'm thinking, this is crazy. Are we a third world country? And that has a profound impact. If we start getting blackouts, there's a profound impact on economic activity in the economy. It's crazy. It's very ideological driven. It's very politically driven. And we need basically someone very strong to stand up and say, we can't keep going down this path, otherwise we'll impoverish the population. And Australia is being a gas powerhouse, should have one of the cheapest energies on the planet, but it's not the case. It's expensive. And, I just shake my head with the madness that's going on. But as you say, it's not just energy, though. There's other areas like immigration at the moment is more than double the long-term averages. Why are we doing it? Now, I've often referred to Australia as a population Ponzi scheme. In other words, we just keep bringing people in to drive economic growth. The government doesn't want a recession, by definition, 2/4 of negative GDP. They don't want that. So what do? They keep bringing in more and more people to drive spending and drive economic activity. But if you look at a GDP per capita, it's negative. So in other words, the standard of living of the average Australian is in decline. It's crazy. And then we've got all this fiscal spending, which drives inflation. So it makes the Reserve Bank's job much harder and harder to achieve. And, I feel for them in that sense, even though I question their competencies to some degree. The reality is they've got the one tool to try and bring down inflation. And the problem is it affects everyone differently. If you're a retiree, it affects you in a positive way. If you're a person with a mortgage, it affects you negatively. So it's a terrible position we've got ourselves into, and it really requires the federal government to take action, not just the Reserve Bank, to take the pressure off. But as I say, giving people handouts doesn't do anything. It's very short-term, and it doesn't really address the structural issues that we face.
Well, it sounds good if you only watch, 10 seconds of the news or a budget announcement and you hear Albanese saying, well, yeah, this money for your power bill. It does sound good. But we've got a couple of callers who have already called in, and we really want to take your thoughts on 1-800-316-316. This is Alex Cook from Wealth with Purpose, taking your calls, talking about the economy and the cost of living crisis that we're all facing. We're going to take a break, and after the break, come back with your calls on 1-800-316-316.
There are many ways people listen to Vision. AM or FM radio, on our website, through the Vision app. or even on the Vast satellite platform. If you watch TV at home through Vast, why not check it out? Just select channel 614 on your set-top box. To find out more about all the ways you can listen to Vision, head to vision.org.au/radio. That's vision.org.au/radio. Vision.
Revival is sweeping across Australia, and station sponsor Bible League is providing vital resources to local pastors, evangelists and volunteers in Indigenous communities. For just $15, you can put a plain English version Bible in the hands of an Aboriginal Christian, hungry for God's Word and the truth of the Gospel. Visit bibleleague.org.au/vision to donate today.
Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
Welcome back to 2020. We are talking all things economy, the cost of living crisis, and we have Alex Cook from Wealth with Purpose, and we're taking your calls on 1-800-316-316. We're just about to take a call from Anthony in Lithgow, New South Wales, which is where they used to make there was a small arms factory. They used to make the 303 rifles there for the Second World War. But, Alex, I just want to remind us all, do you remember in 2007, Kevin Rudd, the Prime Minister, said that climate change was the greatest moral crisis of our generation? That was in 2007. And, I'd like to ask the question, what has Rudd done about this so-called moral crisis in all those years since then? Are you aware of any action from Kevin Rudd?
I'm not. I tried to forget about him, to be honest. But look, I think, as I've said before, my view is the whole thing is mad. Australia should have cheap energy. And, we're one of the most resource-blessed nations on earth. Why is it that our energy prices are so high? And why are we literally shooting ourselves in the foot through crazy energy policies for something that, Australia's carbon emissions are less than 2% of the world. So unless you can get China and India to act, I find the whole thing a very futile, discussion. But, I appreciate that there are very polarising views on this topic.
Sure, but it does have a very real cost, and it's increased our cost of living. It's increased our energy prices without a doubt. But I want to listen to the thoughts of...
Immoral.
Yeah, it is immoral, mate. But let's go to Anthony in Lithgow. He's been very patiently waiting for us. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this?
Good morning, guys. Look, I'm from Lithgow. It's a coal mining town, and we supply coal to overseas and also to our power stations. But there's a couple of things. Last year, we had to call the police to our neighbour multiple times under concern for welfare because we hadn't seen our neighbour for weeks. He couldn't afford to keep the lights on in the house or the heater. This week, it's been minus 5.5 degrees in Lithgow, and today it's sub 10 degrees. People are doing it pretty tough. That's one thing. The second thing is people having to resort to short-term money loans like Afterpay and other short-term money lenders to put food on the table for their families. People are really doing it tough, and the world's falling apart. They're turning their backs on God, and the result is a left-wing environment, and people are really, really doing it tough. And we get money, but they're not surviving. These people who can't eat and people who can't keep warm when it's cold.
Wow. Can I ask that neighbour, is that a retired gentleman, the neighbour who can't afford to keep the lights on?
Yeah, this is not just a one-off event in our town. There's multiple people in our town who they can't run the air conditioner, they can't run the gas heater. They end up going to bed and putting the electric blanket on and switching the lights off. This is not just a one-off event. This is lots of people in our town who are on Skid Row every day of their life.
And I want to, Alex, get your thoughts on this. But before I do, the sad thing about this story is that elderly neighbour of yours probably worked his whole life, paid taxes his whole life in good faith, funded the lifestyles of these government ministers that are swanning around the world and doing what they do and saying what they say. And here's a working Australian who can't even afford in his retirement years to keep the lights on. It's horrible. Alex, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, 100%. Look, firstly, thanks, Anthony, for sharing that story. I suspect that is an extremely widespread phenomenon now. More and more people are experiencing it. That's one issue, but there's also those that are now sleeping in their cars because they can't afford to rent. So there's 20% population that
we've
is
got the
massively
homeless
affected.
Like we've got a massive
Sorry, go
homeless issue. We've got a massive homeless issue in our town as well, and people living in caves, living in the bush, living in cars, couch surfing, living on the street. Sub-zero temperatures. It's pretty tough, and
It's unbelievable.
people are just not surviving.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. But
Well,
Anthony, we've got a few callers. You go, Alex. Yep.
I was just going to say, what we're witnessing in Australia and indeed the Western world is the destruction of the middle class. That's what's happening due to all these crazy socialist policies. And Anthony, you hit the nail on the head. The comment you made was, we've turned our backs on God. And as soon as you do that and you take God out of the thinking process, you crumble as a society. And so it's tragic watching an amazing nation like Australia unnecessarily crumble because we've turned our backs on God. And that's what's going to happen as prosperity will decline.
Yeah. Hey, Anthony, I want to thank you so much for calling in. So we've got a couple more calls we want to get to before the news, but I really appreciate your report. That's just horrible, horrible, horrible. But thanks for joining us on 2020 today. Okay, we got some couple of more callers. We got Glenn from Sydney in New South Wales. Glenn, welcome to the program.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, mate. What are your thoughts today?
I just wanted to ask a question. Actually, is one thing I can't get my head around is why interest rates affect the cost of price index or the rate rise and slows down the rate rise, but in interest rates and etc. How's that? Those two work together.
How does interest rates impact inflation? You mean? Is that,
that's the one. That's the one.
So, it's great. Look, it's a great question because it's very important to understand sort of the nuances around these things. So essentially, as rates rise, it increases the cost of borrowing and reduces demand. So the only way to get inflation down is to try and remove the demand. So raising interest rates potentially pushes you into recession, and that's what we're seeing now. Growth in Australia is at 0.1%, and that's because the cost of everything is going up, and when I say the cost of everything, interest rates, as you push them up, the cost of everything increases, whether it's your mortgage, etc. And the same applies to businesses. Businesses borrow money, and so they come under more and more pressure and get less and less profitable as rates rise. And so then what that does is it reduces demand and therefore takes the pressure off prices, and prices start to fall back down. That's the basic logic to it. And obviously falling rates then drive demand. So, for example, if the Reserve Bank started lowering rates tomorrow, demand would start to pick up for things because the cost of living would decline for many, many people in the economy. Obviously, it affects different people differently, depending on age and stage of life and what you own, etc. So it affects everyone slightly differently. But and that's why it's a blunt instrument, because this is the problem the Reserve Bank has. But ultimately, what they're trying to do by bumping up interest rates is to reduce the demand in the economy, to weaken it, and that'll take the price pressure off. So, in other words, they're trying to deflate it, if you like. That's what they're trying to achieve by putting up rates. Yeah. And then the reverse is true. So if the economy starts to get really weak, they'll lower rates to try and pick up demand. So work inversely to each other. That's a simplistic way of explaining it, but that's the basic logic. If that makes sense. Cool.
Thank you very much. Nice, thank you.
Glenn, can I just ask, amongst you and your family and your friends, what's your feeling and perspective on the cost of living at the moment in Australia?
Everything's obviously going up. I sort of live out of Parramatta now, but I grew up in Palm Beach area, and I feel for my younger brother who's sort of paying off a property in Palm Beach area, which is obviously quite expensive, and he's got to earn quite a good wage to be able to just keep things going. So it's getting harder and harder, and I really have trouble understanding the banks because a lot of the times I don't see when things change with the Reserve Bank, you don't always see the same reflection in the banks coming down, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's true.
Absolutely, mate.
That's true.
Well, Glenn, I want to thank you so much for calling us today, because we do have another call we want to get to before the news is upon us. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us on 2020 today.
Thank you.
So we're going to go to one more call, Alex, before the national news, and that is Tim from Redbank. Tim, welcome.
Oh, g'day. Andrew, how you going? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, champion. What's your question or comment today?
Yes. Oh, just a comment on energy price. I only just turned the show on, Andrew, and heard you talking about energy prices and cost of living crisis. Well, we're on a farm out here near Esk, and when we use electricity to irrigate.
Yep.
And we used to have a off-peak irrigation tariff, which was half the price at night time. Early last year, Energex cancelled that on us, and as well as that, the price has doubled. So we've sort of, I think you can call that a quadrupling of our price of electricity just to pump water to grow food.
Wow.
So that puts a significant strain on our operation here, and so we don't see any hope forward for the lowering of electricity prices. I don't think either of the major parties really are serious about lowering energy prices. So we put a solar installation on for our house, which cost us about $15,000, and then we're looking at putting a system in to cancel our irrigation bill, and that's $40,000. So we're just taking that step to shore up the viability of our operation, because we think sort of if we don't, we're going to be stuck, and we don't want to be paying for electricity, keep paying and paying and paying, and then have to do it later anyway. So obviously there's a lot of other farms in the same boat. Some will keep going and some will fold, and I guess that'll feed into the cost of living as well as demand increases as certain farms close down. And what do you think about that?
Well, it's not good, mate. What are you farming, Tim?
Avocados and citrus.
So how much property on there? How big a farm are you on?
We've got 34 acres here.
Yep.
So but we're only a small operation, but you know, everyone would be in the same boat. The more you grow, the higher the electricity price is going to be, obviously. So.
And obviously the cost of your production is going to be passed on to the consumers eventually, which means the food prices are going to go up and up and up. So, Alex, just before we go to the news in about 2 minutes, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, look, to be honest, I hadn't thought of it before, but that's scary because farmers are the most critical element to our economy in the sense they're feeding us all. But if the prices, as Tim said, if they keep going up and many farmers start to go under, then we're going to have a supply problem. So not only is everyone experiencing just the general cost of living, but then if we start having supply issues, then that will drive it up even further, and just the cost of food alone will rise. It's quite frightening. But I think Tim made a valid comment, which I completely agree with, and that is that the major parties, I don't actually think either of them are serious, in the same way they're not serious about housing affordability. They all have this rhetoric, but their policies only ever drive it up higher. So I agree. I think that's a major issue. People need to be on the phone, writing letters, all those sort of things to their local MP, and really becoming more politically active to get action on these things, because these are only going to make things a lot worse. And this blessed nation of Australia may not be blessed for much longer if we allow farmers to go to the wall. It's frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. And neither of the major parties really care. Well, I don't think they care about the farmers, because the farmers are not a big voting bloc in Australia. But Tim, I really feel your pain, mate. Like it's awful. And you know, I know you obviously love being on the land. You love doing what you do. And I feel like the major parties don't really seem to show a lot of care or concern for the people in the bush. But all we can say, mate, is thank you for calling us today, and just keep fighting the good fight. Absolutely. And stay in touch, Tim. Okay.
No worries, Andrew. Thanks, mate.
God bless you, mate. God bless you.
See you later. Bye.
Well, Alex, we have come to the end of our segment today. I want to thank you. It's Alex from Wealth with Purpose. And if you want to connect to Alex, you can find him on Wealth with Purpose on the internet. Alex Cook, it's always a pleasure having you on the program, and I look forward to our next chat here on 2020.
Excellent. Likewise, Andrew. See you soon.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.